back to our channel where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on the royal family. We provide you with the exciting news a minute ago. Princess Anne hands William the Queen's secret letter. His reaction stuns the palace prince. William the Prince of Wales had a startling medical emergency while enjoying a quiet moment with his family, as reported by sources from the royal household. Individuals who have deliberated over the situation are certain that it was not only a simple faint resulting from an extended duration or the kind of collapse often envisioned when prominent people suddenly become immobile. Witnesses have offered accounts of an event that irrevocably altered an individual's life and generated a profound disturbance inside an organization that has traditionally depended on clarity, ritual, and the preservation of lineage. A solitary sealed sheet precipitated all of this. Reports indicate that William lost consciousness within seconds while reading words that challenged the official narrative on his origins and his unquestioned entitlement to the throne. The setting was designed to evoke coziness. A tranquil, elegantly furnished space inside a royal residence familiar to the family was chosen for the family reunion. This area was selected to evoke dignity and stability via meticulously placed furniture, muted hues, and an atmosphere that prioritized continuity over crisis. Those present recall not serenity, but a division that transpired abruptly, like a scene from a film. Moments before William epitomized composure, he was alert, engaged, and represented the modern heir who fulfills his public responsibilities without seeming encumbered, yet privately experiencing those obligations. Suddenly, without forewarning, he collapsed. The ensuing dance was immediate and precise. Both family members and staff exhibited a pragmatic professional eagerness. Although brief, the fall seemed to signify more than mere physical weakness. It resembled a definitive resolution. Princess Anne, designated as Princess Royal, was among the first respondents. Sources indicate that she acted decisively, motivated by familial care and instinct, rather than constrained by ceremonial formalities. She neglected to consider the method due to her urgency in awakening her nephew. Observers afterward claimed that her expression exhibited both resignation and fear, as if she had long anticipated the arrival of this day. Reports indicate that Camilla, the Queen Consort, exhibited a demeanor of coolness and composure which some observers saw as a kind of shock that she was adeptly managing. King Charles III was briefly incapacitated, unable to move or talk due to temporary paralysis. Onlookers had a profound sense of discomfort upon seeing the senior family members rendered speechless and immobilized by shock. A rift seemed to have emerged throughout the family, and the incident was more consequential than any solitary fainting episode. A clandestine preliminary assessment was conducted by the medical specialists who were convened at the earliest opportunity. The vasovagal episode they had was noted in the first report provided. This kind of syncope is sometimes induced by fast emotional or physiological stress. Nonetheless, several individuals who saw the events leading to the collapse did not attribute it solely to fatigue or overexertion. Just before to William losing consciousness, he was clutching an ancient sealed document that slipped from his grip. Individuals present at the event deliberated about the occurrence. They described a letter with a broken seal, characterizing it as a kind of private correspondence often stored in archives before being returned to vaults. Following the occurrence, witnesses present at the site said that the guy designated to be king had been physically incapacitated by the circumstances seen. They believed that either a reality or a concept he had been conditioned to accept as true had provoked him. The document, reconstructed by those knowledgeable with the events, originates from the Royal Archives in Windsor. The discovery was not fortuitous nor incidental. Princess Anne, while perusing sealed treasures from the era of the late Queen, uncovered the document. The late Queen was renowned for her meticulous safeguarding of papers. Any item bearing her personal seal was deemed particularly significant. Anne is said to have immediately recognized the significance of the letter. She briefly examined it to comprehend its potential significance, then faced a challenging decision to either conceal it to preserve the institution's sustainability or disclose it to William, as he had a right to know by any humanitarian standard. Many close to Anne argue that the choice reflects the painful role struggle inherent in royal family life. The Crown and her family were exerting conflicting pressures on her, leaving her in a state of indecision. Anne is often regarded as an individual dedicated to her obligations, having devoted several decades to navigating a familial culture where secrecy functions as both a safeguard and a confinement. Sources indicate that she monitored William in the days before the delivery of the letter to him and contemplated the potential ramifications of both exposure and concealment. William is not only a public figure, he is also a son and a father, and his private life cannot be entirely dissociated from the consequences that may arise in the public domain. She was aware of this, as are several others who cherish him. She decided to notify him discreetly upon reaching her decision. The reports indicate that the transfer was unremarkable. In a lonely corridor, Anne handed him a folded piece of paper, only asked that he read it alone. The prince first reacted to the interruption with a mild irritation typical of an individual managing several substantial obligations. He was absorbed and courteous, questioning the need of archival material encroaching upon his time. Anne's facial expression indicated the gravity of the situation. He withdrew, broke the seal of the deceased queen, and started reading. Witness testimonies indicate that his reaction was immediate and profoundly influential. The language used on the page, the name inscribed inside, and the narrative it suggested all exerted a profound influence. Observers saw that his hands trembled, his breathing became laborious, and his complexion paled, as if the news were siphoning the vitality from him. The letter, written decades before and deliberately hidden among these narratives, asserted a lineage that diverged from the widely recognized account of events. The implications suggest that the foundational assumptions of hereditary monarchy, predicated on the certainty of the king's paternity, may be erroneous. It is essential to reflect on the circumstances that the letter purportedly provoked. The 1980s are seen as a foundational era marked by the union of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer, a marriage presented to the public as a fairy tale, but conducted in secrecy under significant turmoil. The marriage was extremely intense, as shown by Diana's taped admissions and the later published biographies. She articulated the sensation of solitude and described being in a visually stunning house but lacked emotional sustenance. The letter indicates that the loneliness depicted in its tale fostered chances for intimacies and relationships beyond the legal bounds of marriage, characterized as human responses to profound emotional loss. The article indicates that such encounters adversely affected children born into families where the public narrative and private reality were incongruent. The paper named one member from Diana's social circle as the person in issue, according to sources. Sources indicate that the person had been expunged from official records previous to this. William was astonished by the name inscribed in pen on antiquated paper, prompting him to doubt his paternity, while also gaining a new intimate insight into the suffering his mother had experienced. He was raised with a narrative about Diana. She epitomized compassion and was a woman misled by forces indifferent to her emotions. His dedication to her was reassessed upon discovering that part of the narrative had been crafted to hide a deeper anguish. In his perception, what formerly seemed to be an act of preservation now resembled an act of obliteration. Nonetheless, eyewitnesses assert that the significance of the letter transcended the confines of a singular personal disclosure. The work was characterized by its discussions as the apparent apex of a broader initiative aimed at supervising historical verities. They assert that a prompt effort to safeguard the public story transpired after Diana's demise in 1997. Reports indicate that a small cadre of senior officials and trusted family associates, referred to as the custodians of continuity, swiftly mobilized to collect records, accounts, and any other materials that may potentially incite controversy or erode public trust. This was not depicted as dishonesty for its own sake from the institutional perspective. Instead, it was framed as a meticulously devised strategy. The crown must be preserved. The nation's future must be safeguarded from the political turmoil that a scandal could potentially incite. Individuals acquainted with Queen Elizabeth II's mindset and methodologies have said that she was crucial to those initiatives. They asserted that her motivation stemmed not from personal animosity, but from a sense of obligation to fulfill her duties, which she pursued to an extraordinary extent. In this narrative, she viewed the monarchy as an organism necessitating safeguarding against any disturbances that may lead to its collapse. From that viewpoint, the sealing of some documents served as a kind of guardianship intended to safeguard future monarchs, particularly William, from any duties that may possibly burden them or the institution they represented. Nonetheless, this stewardship had a moral cost, Continuity was preserved at the expense of offering full transparency to those most affected by it. The extent of King Charles's participation in the cover-up is more difficult to determine. He is shown as participating in some tales that endorse the premise that protection and continuity are essential. Others have suggested that he was more cautious in his estimates owing to his hesitance and the intricate conversations he was involved in over his legacy and obligations. William eventually saw his silence as a kind of betrayal irrespective of his internal thoughts. Camilla the Queen Consort has been aware of some elements of the tale for many years. She had a deep understanding of the fragility of the monarchy's public image, informed by her own experience of evolving from a vilified individual in some circles to a revered member of her family. Those familiar with her said that she was conflicted between her inclination to sympathize with others and her drive for self-preservation. Ultimately, she opted for silence, certain it would do the least harm. William was raised and educated to embody the ideal modern heir in this milieu. He was instructed to be committed to public duty, to behave judiciously, and to be devoted to helping the populace. He assumed the role of a symbol of continuity. He was the living connection intended to bridge an antiquated institution and contemporary society. Nonetheless, as shown by the letter, that narrative was predicated upon a tale that was at best insufficient. The revelation of a possible inconsistency in his lineage was not just a personal insult, but it also eroded the conventional basis for hereditary succession. The possibility for ambiguity was an earthquake that destabilized the system, which had long depended on the clarity of bloodlines and an uninterrupted line of succession to uphold its power. This earthquake might reverberate across the political, judicial, and public religious institutions. The interval after William's collapse was both personal and pressing. He received medical assistance, was moved from the public place, and was attended to by his family and healthcare specialists. Nevertheless, the atmosphere in the room had already been altered by the contents of the document. The formerly composed faces became introspective, and the once quiet whispers transformed into open speculation. Despite being returned to an envelope, the letter's existence was disclosed to the public. The breach resulted in the proliferation of a novel virus marked by gossip, fear, and bureaucratic inertia. Initially, the narrative presented to those outside the castle walls was that the prince had fainted from exhaustion. The few comments emphasized privacy and recovery, emphasizing that the matter was being addressed. Nonetheless, the answer's deficiency in clarity and the little willingness to engage in additional discussion just heightened the intrigue. Journalists expressed skepticism over the alignment of the medical report with eyewitness accounts from the scene, and they requested further information. Investigative journalists started the process of interrogating staff attendants and those with extensive knowledge of the family's internal activities. Gradually, the different bits of evidence coalesced, constructing a more complete narrative, indicating that the fainting episode was attributable to factors beyond mere weariness. Suspicion started to infiltrate the family. Employees used to discretion were compelled to choose between their loyalty and their ethical principles. The quantity of inquiries escalated. Who else was cognizant of the letter? Who was exposed to it? Could it be that an individual inside the household was divulging information to the media? The need for clarification and the pressure of speculation led to the disintegration of the meticulously structured framework of royal secret, whereby confidences were exchanged within a restricted, trusted group. William had significant and intricate emotional consequences due to the occurrence. The anguish of bereavement, betrayal, and fury culminated in a toxic despair with several levels. In his perception, his mother was not just a public figure, but also a woman who in her private life had confronted and concealed her anguish in manners he now saw as less protecting and more manipulating. The sensation of being curated, of having his life shaped by decisions made without his consent, fostered profound animosity inside him. The wrath was not concealed. William demanded that a confrontation occur according to insider sources. The father and son engaged in a private meeting at Windsor Castle, which many acquaintances of the family have deemed atypical in modern times. Reports indicate that William, who always adhered to the appropriate protocols, forsook the niceties. He posed the essential inquiry, "Are you, my father, direct and intimate, bearing the same gravity as a verdict upon its arrival?" In these accounts, Charles reacted with distress instead of offering clear legal reassurance or an unequivocal scientific dismissal. At that moment, he appeared disorganized, emotional, and unable to provide the definitive solace his son sought. Words eluded him, and tears began to flow. The conversation failed to address the urgent matter. Rather, it complicated the situation further. William exerted additional pressure, accusing his father of imposing an undisclosed burden upon him and of presenting him as the future heir to the throne, despite the erosion of the factual basis for that claim. His assertions were not solely concerned with the biological evidence a paternity test would yield. They also encompassed issues of neglect and concealment. Anne experienced a significant erosion of trust. As the bearer of the letter, she became a target of William's ire for her failure to disclose its contents promptly. The ferocity of his anger was sufficient to disturb even her typically composed and disciplined demeanor. The meeting evolved into a pivotal moment for the family, representing a convergence of personal grievances and institutional crises that rendered traditional reconciliation methods inadequate. The situation transitioned from a personal issue to a constitutional matter of national significance when private discussions regarding the dilemma became public. Family strife was not the sole concern that infiltrated political and media narratives. There was also the issue of civic and legal continuity. The inquiry arose: if succession through inheritance relies on direct descent, what occurs in cases of descent uncertainty? Predominantly British succession law, developed over centuries and reinforced by legislation, such as the Act of Settlement 1701 and subsequent amendments, does not readily accommodate an heir whose biological rights are in question. Constitutional lawyers and scholars began to engage in discussions about hypothetical scenarios previously confined to academic speculation. The public's response was contentious and fervent. Many asserted that lineage should be subordinated to character and civic contribution. They were confident in his requisite qualities for effective leadership, notwithstanding any private doubts he may have harbored. They highlighted William's accomplishments, including his advocacy for mental health, his conservation efforts, and his palpable empathy. Some argued that the authority of the crown depended on an unbroken hereditary lineage, contending that undermining this principle risked reducing the monarchy to a mere symbolic entity devoid of genuine legitimacy. The discourse surrounding this issue permeated public spaces such as pubs, living rooms, and social media platforms, where entrenched beliefs confronted evolving perspectives on legitimacy and identity. The members of Parliament were cognizant of the potential consequences. Members of Parliament engaged in a discussion behind closed doors on potential legal ramifications, as well as whether or not the constitutional machinery was in place to handle the situation of an heir whose biological claims were being contested. While some people advocated for a formal investigation or the formation of a legislative committee, others advised against making fast changes to the Constitution during a crisis that sprang as much from individual anguish as it did from public interest. Republican voices saw an opening and smelled it out, claiming that the incident demonstrated the inexplicable instability of inherited institutions. Commentators from all over the world analyzed the potential consequences for the Commonwealth. If the legitimacy of the monarch were to be called into question, the symbolic links that bind together the territories, where the crown still serves as head of state, may be re-examined. An opportunity presented itself for fresh discussion on the future of constitutional law in countries that were seeing a surge in Republican enthusiasm. William had two individuals who served as stabilizing influences within the family: his wife Catherine and his aunt Princess Anne. Catherine, renowned for her emotional intelligence and unwavering commitment to privacy, chose a more understated approach. Sources indicate that her primary concern was to protect their children and ensure domestic stability. She offered William straightforward and uncomplicated counsel, emphasizing that identity transcends genetics. His worth resided in his actions, the family he had established, and his public service. His emotional grounding and pragmatic perspective proved more effective in stabilizing him than any legal counsel could have been. Despite Anne's involvement in the decision to disclose the letter, she endeavored to steer the family away from mutual blame and towards a more rational comprehension of the circumstances. She urged William to contemplate how private crises could be converted into public leadership, and prompted him to consider whether it was feasible to respond to revealed truths with dignity instead of anger. Reports indicate that both Kate and Anne advocated for a narrative that redefined legitimacy as rooted in earned trust and service, rather than mere lineage. William's decision was neither straightforward nor made quickly. He had the option of relinquishing his claim, withdrawing from the situation in order to prevent any more instability for the institution, and perhaps averting a constitutional catastrophe. He came to a different and more complicated conclusion when he had time to consider it and confer with his family and advisors. He made the decision to remain where he was instead of running away, and he decided to face the truth in an open and honest manner when the time was right. He also decided to recognize the complicated nature of his ancestry and to reinforce his claim by placing his allegiance not just on his descent, but also on his fresh dedication to duty and honesty. His understanding of what constitutes legitimacy evolved in the direction of a model in which the monarchy is maintained via popular consent and lived duty. In other words, a monarchy that continues to exist because the public bestows their trust upon it, rather than just due to the fact that that person's birth certificate states that they are supposed to rule. The alteration was not merely rhetorical, it was profound. It indicated that the monarchy was amenable to institutional reassessment and willing to be judged based on its efficacy and public accountability in addition to its lineage. It proposed a pathway for the monarchy and democratic principles to coexist harmoniously with a modern interpretation of leadership. In William's instance, this represented a considerable emotional burden, necessitating public resilience. Following this decision, he reportedly experienced another breakdown, as noted by those in his inner circle. This was not a faint due to physiological shock, but rather an intense moment of exhaustion, induced by the weight of obligation. The image of a future monarch brought to his knees by both reality and the overwhelming array of choices he confronted became a poignant symbol of sorrow for the concealed truths and a resolve to reconstruct under different terms. The palace promptly addressed the aftermath from both practical and political perspectives. Advisors conferred with constitutional law attorneys, private practice counselors engaged with family members, and communications teams began drafting potential statements. To avert a protracted constitutional crisis, legal experts conducted a discreet investigation into the complexities of succession law to ascertain which procedures, if any, might be activated. While some explored legislative avenues to amend succession regulations, others argued that a comprehensive public explanation, coupled with a newly earned narrative of legitimacy, would prove more enduring than swift statutory alterations. Nonetheless, the public's forbearance had its limitations. Individuals sought clarification on various matters, including the medical incident, the letter's contents, and the monarchy's future actions. Regarding the question of parentage from decades past, the majority of people in Britain and globally were more concerned with the institution's current response than with historical details. Would the family opt for litigation and continued secrecy? Would they risk exacerbating an already fraught situation by fully disclosing the document? Alternatively, would they attempt to redefine the monarchy's narrative in terms of service representation and consent? Regardless of the chosen method of disclosure, the mere existence of the letter had initiated irreversible changes. The monarchy, historically adept at navigating controversy, now faced a crisis that challenged its fundamental organizational principles. The responses garnered legal counsel, public appeals, private mediation, and the inception of a strategy to redefine legitimacy signified a significant transformation in the operational dynamics of the House of Windsor in the 21st century. In the midst of the public discussion, there was a very private family sadness that continued to be at the core of the debate. A father who was mourning a son who felt deceived, and a mother whose memory had been both respected and maybe rewritten for the sake of institutional objectives. This is not a straightforward story with a villainous character and a victimized one. This is a tale that explores the ways in which institutions and personal lives come into conflict with each other. It also examines the ways in which choices that are made in the name of preservation may end up harming the very people they claim to be protecting, as well as the arduous and sometimes deceitful work that comes with stewardship. It is possible that those who portray the concealment as a cold calculation are partially correct. On the other hand, those who maintain that it was an act of true guardianship may also discover that there is some reason for their position. It is impossible to deny the fact that decisions taken with the finest intentions may be seen as deceit by those who are most impacted by them. The House of Windsor faced a pivotal moment observed by Britain and the global community. The urgent medical issue had been addressed, yet its implications permeated public consciousness, rendering the correspondence no longer a private affair. The family's future options, whether to engage in litigation, disclose comprehensive information to the public, recontextualize the Crown's claims regarding service and consent, or retreat into further silence, would significantly influence not only the dynasty's future, but also broader dialogues concerning authority and accountability. The decisions made at this juncture will reverberate for centuries, altering not only the occupants of the throne, but also the rationale behind the monarchy's continued existence. Ultimately, the narrative unveiled a persistent human dilemma that surpasses constitutional law and societal sentiment. The challenge of reconciling the desire to protect an institution with the ethical obligation to be truthful to those most impacted by it. The downfall of William and the subsequent repercussions exposed the vulnerability of a family that has long represented continuity. They served as a reminder to the nation that the duties of monarchy are both personal and public, and that the trust underpinning authority may be as tenuous as the individuals who exercise it. Regardless of the path the family chooses moving forward, it will be evaluated not only for its legal validity, but also for its moral integrity. Furthermore, the family's selected course will be judged on its capacity to transform hurt sentiments into a renewed claim for the public's trust. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share it.